Hi, this is Kathy Ganatic. I continue my series on the 36 decans of the zodiac today with Sagittarius III, the last 10 degrees of the sign. When we get to Sagittarius III, we're at the end of the quest. The sign of Sagittarius is this fire sign ruled by Jupiter, a planet of expansion and optimism. And it very much has to do with taking up a quest for meaning, trying to discern or understand oneself in light of being inspired by something larger than ourselves to move out into the world and make meaning, perhaps take up a project that allows us to make meaning out of our life. And when we get to Sagittarius III, we're at the point where we're kind of exhausted by the quest and we're beginning to understand the limitations of our human nature. This particular decan, in addition to being ruled by Jupiter, the decanic rulers are Saturn, the god of limitations and hard work, what's possible and what's not possible in the material world, as well as the sun, that vision, that expansive vision. So we're going to see that people with planets or points in this part of the zodiac are grappling with questions of what's enough, when is their quest finished. Also, they're grappling with, or they may tend to be people that stick to the quest, no matter what, no matter how difficult it is, and in humbling themselves and coming upon their limitations, come to know something about themselves, perhaps even discover what started them on the quest to begin with. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the chart of Jamie Lee Curtis, who have a rising degree here. She did the Halloween series over a course of 45 years and learned something in that process. She also won an Oscar at the age of 64. And we're going to see how that kind of fits in with maybe her becoming an actress to begin with. Both of her parents were actors, and in her acceptance speech, she explains that they never received an Oscar. So it may be that she discovered through the course of her acting career some of her own karma around those questions of becoming an actor and what it means to her. So we can kind of think about that. I think it's really interesting. And I'll talk, of course, about the planets. I said Saturn and the Sun rule this decan as well. And I'll talk about the tarot card, the 10 of Wands, and the Kabbalah, Malkuth, that moment on the tree of life when we're manifesting something in the real world. And as I said, I'll finish up talking about Jamie Lee Curtis's chart. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel, and I would love it. So let's talk about Sagittarius briefly. Let me go back up to that slide. There we go. Sagittarius is a fire sign, as I said, ruled by Jupiter, this planet of expansion and abundance. And it's the sign of the quest, this desire to find a unity between intention and action, creating coherence between spirit and body, the higher functions and lower functions. So Sagittarius is represented by the centaur, half man, half human. Excuse me, half man, half beast. And the human part also carries the divine type energy, the way in which human beings are different from animals, arguably, in the fact that they have, that part of what they have is self-awareness and consciousness, God consciousness, you could say. And so there's something about grappling with the question of what it is to be both divine and conscious and unconscious at the same time, let's say, divine and animal, those instincts that moves us. Our animal nature is part of this. And we all, at different periods of our life, have moments where we're taken up by some new idea that we want to explore, right? This quest, this question maybe of the meaning of life. And oftentimes the way we come to know meaning in our own life is by moving out into the world on something that has taken us up that we've gotten excited about. And so for everyone, the quest can simply be the part of your life where you're inspired to do something new. So thinking about the sign of Sagittarius, the tarot cards that are associated with this sign. I'll go back to the individual card that's associated with the last 10 degrees in a moment. But these tarot cards really lay out the meaning of Sagittarius. This movement from the beginning of the quest at the Eight of Wands, which is the first 10 degrees of the zodiac. Sagittarius 1 is associated with the Eight of Wands. And we all start out with being inspired by, we're going to do this thing, and it's flowing freely because we're excited at the beginning. It's all inspiration and movement forward. And then we get to the second 10 degrees of Sagittarius, the Nine of Wands, and that's where we begin to encounter maybe dragons, difficulties on our way to accomplish that project. And we have to protect and defend ourselves and discern what we want. And now at the end of the quest, we get to the 10 of Wands, and we have been pursuing our goal for a long time, and we are tired, and we're coming up against the limitations of what it is to be embodied in a human body that has its limitations. All the vision that we had, the inspiration, that fiery inspiration of what we might accomplish, we're coming to know maybe we're not going to be able to get everything we wanted with that original vision. And so there's something about people with points or planets in this part of the zodiac that these are the questions that they struggle with. They may come into circumstances where they realize they've been pushing themselves too hard to get everything they want, and that they need to lay down some of the burden, not take it all upon themselves, and be realistic about what's possible. And at the same time, they have a tenacity that demands that they move forward to completion. So even if there's difficulties, they are going to put in the hard work over a long period of time to get to that goal. And we can really see this exemplified in the chart of Jamie Lee Curtis. We're going to talk about that at the end. But that idea of tenacity for the vision, Saturn, Sun. Saturn rewards hard work over a long period of time. And Saturn wants to finish things. It feels super responsible. So going back quickly to, not sure if I looked at this, just to flesh out quickly that the two planets that rule this part of the zodiac, this 10 degrees, in addition to Jupiter, are the Sun, which is the planet all the other planets revolve around. So it's got this centering quality. It's got a warmth about it. It's got a vision about it. Intentionality, consciousness, where the sun is what we can see during the daytime and we're aware of. The moon is what's hidden. It's that nighttime, fuzzy, shadowy light. So with this part of the zodiac, there's going to be this clear vision of what I want. And also, in addition to the sun ruling this 10 degrees, we've got Saturn. And Saturn says, you might have the vision, but I'm going to make you work hard to get what you want, to finish that quest. And I'm going to set boundaries and limitations. I'm going to cut things off if they don't belong. I'm going to demand that you maybe suffer a little bit, unfortunately, in the sense of there can be some physical suffering, literally, like with working so hard to accomplish or get what you want or to finish a quest. If anybody's ever done a big project, it's demanding. It takes a lot out of you. And we're going to see this again, or we saw it already with the 10 of Wands card, where that I'm going to talk about again in a second. Anyway, so that's the decanic rulers. And then here's my slide on that 10 of Wands, which I've already talked about a little bit, the card from the Rider-Waite deck that is associated with Sagittarius III. And here, of course, we see this man stooped over holding these wands, like, I'm gonna get to that. You see, the town is in the distance and he's gonna get there, but boy, he looks tired. And when you pull this card in a tarot spread, depending on the cards that are near it, it might be like a moment of exhaustion where you need to think about, can I carry this burden, or is it time to set it down for a little while or pare it back? Yeah. And so, as much as that card can be about the fact that you may be reaching your breaking point of exhaustion, there is also something about the card. I was reading Rachel Pollack's book, Tarot Wisdom, kind of fleshing out. She's written a few books on the tarot because I wanted to make sure, because I have this particular I have my South Node in this part of the zodiac. And as much as this card or the energy of this part of the zodiac may feel heavy and like it's too much, there's also something about any of the tens in the tarot deck or in the Tree of Life when we're getting to that point Malkuth, when we're manifesting something in the real world. I'll talk about that in a second. There's something about that completion that is almost like a feedback loop for us in our life, that it's an integration, you could say, of the energy of that suit because we're reaching the end of it. And so limiting an interpretation of this part of the zodiac to the idea that you're working too hard and need to set down your burden isn't quite right. There's also the fact that in completing something, in sticking with something to the end, with its limitations, and committing to manifesting something in the world, and not just giving up, accepting something in its smallness, in humbling ourselves, that we come to know something more deeply about ourselves. And so I thought it was interesting that Rachel Pollack had that same idea in her book. And one of the things she says about this card, and I've kind of blended what she said along with my own ideas, is she said, well, I'm just going to read you the paragraph I wrote after thinking about her thoughts and my thoughts and blending them. This card can also be a card of new life and greater awareness of what your holy grail is, right? The holy grail is the quest, you know? That is the meaning of your actions and enthusiasms when they're manifested in the world. We are inspired. We enter the quest, often not knowing its deeper meaning until we complete the quest. So there's something about some new idea befalling us about a project and us jumping into it and it going well and then having to struggle with all the burdens of it. And then in the end, when it's complete, it's afterwards that we can't come to know why we took up the quest in the first place. And we kind of see that in the life of Jamie Lee Curtis, with her completion of those Halloween movies and the arc of her life. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So I think we could also talk about the ancient texts. I'm not going to take as deep a dive on these this time. I'll leave the slide up for a moment so you can always pause and read the text for yourself. But most of these texts, while they reflect the idea of the sun because they contain the images of gold, and Saturn because they contain some limiting or difficulties, I don't love the way they capture the energy of this part of the zodiac because they tend to go toward more the shadow side of what might come up if you don't put that burden down, or if the quest overtakes you to the point where maybe the ego has taken over, and as a result, maybe you harm people in your path in order to get more than, in order to try and achieve something that's not achievable. So I'm going to set that aside for now and not go too deep into that. And feel free, if you have ideas after reading those particular ancient texts, share them in the comments and we can have a conversation back and forth. Maybe you'll read something into them that I didn't see, but I didn't feel like they fleshed much out about this part of the zodiac. So then let's go to the tree of life. This is the Kabbalah. It's a mystical diagram that represents the descent of divine inspiration into the material world. The lightning flash traces the flow of creative energy from divine source at Cater here at the top. 1 second. I'm just going to get my laser. So Cater up here at the top, and then we see the lightning flash as spirit descends into matter, and we go through each of the 10 cards of the tarot deck. These different, you have swords, which represent thought, and wands, which represent inspiration, fire. Then you have earth, which is pentacles, and then you have cups, which is water. And so for each of these energies in our life, there's a path where you have them first entering, and then, as I said earlier in the video, I believe, there's a way in which as we try to bring spirit into matter, we're going to lose energy all the way along this lightning path. And then ultimately at Malkuth, which is where we're at now, the 10 of Wands, which corresponds with this part of the zodiac, Sagittarius III, we're at the end where we're trying to manifest that inspiration into something real in the world. And so the path from the 9, which is Yesod, to Malkuth, which is 10 on the tree of life. The number 10, as I said earlier, corresponds to the Sephirah Malkuth, the final Sephirah on the pillar of form, the realm of manifestation, completion, embodiment, physical reality, right? Everything I've been saying about we're at the end of the quest, we want to get that project done and make it real. That's part of the energy of this, of Malkuth. It's that point of, okay, what the rubber hits the road and what will we accomplish? Moving from Yesod to Malkuth describes the shift from the subtle inner imaginal world into full material expression. So if you go back to the number 9 of Wands, which corresponded to Sagittarius II, that was a moment where we were encountering dragons, and they could be internal or external, where we encounter problems on our path, where we're having conflicts with people, but it also can be internal conflicts and imaginings about what may go wrong, etc. And so now we're moving into, okay, I'm going to move forward and complete this quest. And in the 10 of Wands, the burden has become literal. Instead of all those imaginings, we're getting to now having to carry that heavy load forward into reality. The figure in the 10 of Wands bears the accumulated results of the entire suit of Wands, fire that's run its course and now must be grounded in something real. And this is Malkuth's lesson. The culmination of the quest, the point where everything gathered along the path becomes tangible. And much of that just reiterates the 10 of Wands in general. You know, the Rider-Waite, when they created the cards, they were working with the notions from the Kabbalah at the same time, just so you get a feel for that. So then let's talk about Jamie Lee Curtis, because I think she's an interesting example. So Jamie Lee Curtis, you may know, starred in the Halloween movies. The first one was, I don't even know, it was 45 years ago, so in the 80s, I think. She completed the series, I think, in 2022. And so she had this lifelong commitment to the series, and she stuck with it. She stuck with her character, Laurie Strode, who was this resilient heroine in the film. They were horror films. I'm not going to lie, I never saw one because that is not my genre. It's like the one genre of film that is too much for me. I'm too sensitive. But I do know and admire Jamie Lee Curtis from her work in the world. And One of the things I found interesting about this particular quest that she took up in the 80s and finished in 45 years later is that as a more is it sort of shows the evolution of her personality in working with these films over a long period of time into the point of mature adulthood, where her last act in connection with these movies was to become the producer, and as producer use her influence to change the storyline arc so that the heroine was seen in the last film as capable, as not only being resilient and surviving, but as thriving by working through the emotional PTSD consequences of the horror that she suffered. And Jamie Lee Curtis, as this matriarch crone at the end of her career, shepherding that story to a point that fit with her own values. And you can imagine she may have taken up, and this, I don't know Jamie Lee Curtis, so this is might just be my fantasy, but she may have taken up those films in part early on because she really wanted to act. And this is something that she was able to, she got the role, and this was a big deal for her. Both of her parents were actors. And so perhaps young and naive, she took them up in an unconscious state where she's just like, I'm going to do this. I really want to act. And then as she matured, perhaps the storylines that she was seeing didn't really fit with her, who she was. But now she could influence it herself. And so I think it's interesting. 45 years is a long time to be working with the character and sticking with it, but it shows that Saturnine, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to complete it. I'm going to finish what I started kind of energy. And then it's also interesting that at the age of 64, she won her first Oscar for the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this also reflects that Saturnine energy. Wherever we have Saturn in our chart in general, oftentimes is where we come to that capacity late in life over a lot of work over a long period of time. And so we see the Saturn influence here. In her speech, she noted that both of her parents, I thought this was really interesting, Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis, had been nominated for an Oscar and had never won. And she gets a little teary-eyed when she does that. I saw the video. And there was a sense that winning the Oscar after years of hard work was the culmination of the quest that had been placed in her hands from birth. Now, this is where I'm going back to that quote I read from an earlier slide, talking about the 10 of Wands as being an integration of something for us, some meaning in our life. I'm going to diverge here, and this really just fits with my philosophy and 20 years of being in Jungian analysis and having my South Node in this part of the zodiac, to say that there is a truth that when we take up things, when spirit says, take up this project and do it, we often think we know why we're doing the thing, or our mind tells us, oh, this is why I'm doing it. But we're not really in charge. And oftentimes we uncover through actually taking up the quest and sticking with a project, regardless of the difficulty, committing to it, then we come to know the meaning when it's completed. What was this thing for us? So you could imagine for Jamie Lee Curtis that taking up the role in Halloween, and then changing the arc of the story as she became a mature woman after much work and after gaining power in the movie industry. You could say in part that she came to know her own power and authority through this process. We could also say, I thought it was really interesting, we could say the similar thing related to her achieving the Oscar for the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. When she was giving her speech and mentioned her parents, it wasn't like a comparison. It was more like she felt she was, I mean, you got the sense that she was completing this for them, that she got this, receiving this Oscar felt like a completion, like reaching the finish line, like the arc of her story had been completed. She was born into an acting family, and any good psychologist knows that oftentimes we can kind of take up our parents' desires. Not that she didn't also desire to be an actress and move into this, but there's something very poignant about her acknowledging that it was so meaningful for her to win this Oscar as though she was winning it for her parents. I'm going to give one last thought on this as being somebody who has their South Node in this degree, to talk about the idea of not knowing in advance why we've taken something up. A couple of examples from my life. One is this series on the Decans. I felt compelled to start it. I didn't know why. And I'm still not sure why, because we're not to the end. But what I have discovered is the reality that the project has changed from the beginning. So that's the flexibility or mutability of Sagittarius, that adapting to the quest as you go along can be very important. That it is a heavy burden, but that I'm so committed to finishing it, which I think is interesting and very reflective of this Sagittarius the third part of Sagittarius. And that I'm discovering that it's not about creating content for other people. I enjoy doing that, but it's much more about getting to know myself through doing the work of creating these videos. It deepens my knowledge of astrology, and every time I do a new Decan, something new opens up to me about the zodiac. And so, and also for myself, about my own self-understanding. There's always some correspondence between the energy of the Decan and what's happening in my life at any particular time. So there's this way in which it turns out astrology is teaching me. And I've always thought that and experienced it many times, but it's really deepened with this particular project and so anyway, so I think that's enough. But I love doing this. And again, I am trying to grow my channel because I feel called to, not necessarily for the sake of money or anything else, but teaching is something that is clearly what I am to bring into the world. It's what gives me joy, and it teaches me to actually share this information. So I hope y'all enjoy it. And I'll see you in about 10 days for Capricorn 1. We're 3/4 of the way through this project. I'm so excited. The finish line is ahead. Have a great day.